Three, two, one, and we're live. Hello there. Thank you for joining us today. I've wanted to speak to you since I found you when I was doing research recently on the whole psychedelic kind of movement, especially based in the UK, because I think everybody hears, oh, in America it's all larger over there, whether it's on podcasts or different kind of research topics. But I don't think it's very much spoken about in this country as much, is it? Do you mind just kind of introducing yourself and saying who you are and what you do?
Hi, so yeah, I'm Martha, and I'm a co-director of the UK Psychedelic Society. So for me, it's interesting to hear that you say that in the UK, perhaps the conversation isn't as prevalent, because actually, we've kind of been here since 2014 as a non-for-profit organization, and we do events and retreats that basically create community around sort of psychedelics. And we've seen our following just expand and expand over these years as psychedelics have become more popular. And so from my angle, I'm really seeing this conversation actually happening here in the UK. So yeah, but I guess that's
Yeah,
sometimes the
you're
echo
deep in the
chamber of
trenches.
this
You're
work.
deep in the trenches of the work at the moment. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
what is it that you mostly focus on? Is there a certain type of psychedelic you focus on, or do you just like looking at them across the board?
Yeah, so my background's in neuroscience, so I'm a lot more interested in sort of the clinical research side of things. So as well as my stuff with the Psychedelic Society, I do medical journalism, so and quite often just like writing about research studies and new discoveries about the therapeutic potentials of these substances and how these substances work. I also volunteer with an organization called Psycare, so we kind of offer drug-related support at festivals. Um, Oh, I don't know if my thing's just frozen.
No, your screen's frozen, but we can still hear you. You're back. You're back.
Okay. Yeah, so another big passion of mine is around psychedelic harm reduction and basically just trying to put messages across for people to take these substances safely.
Yeah, so I mean, when did it begin for you then? Was it just kind of when you was doing did you start neuroscience before and then go down the avenue of where you are now, or was it kind of the reverse of that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been interested in altered states of consciousness, and that was, one of the draws to going into neuroscience and looking to study the brain. And then, yeah, when I graduated, it was like lockdown, and I think I was just a bit unsure over what I was going to do. And I just had this really awesome opportunity to help someone at the Psychedelic Society. And then, kind of through that, like, made my way into the company, and I'm one of the co-directors. And then, began writing a lot about it, like, since I kind of joined the movement. And then through that, I've managed to kind of, yeah, like become a writer essentially. So.
Yeah, I mean, doing any type of research, you can go. We know that we going into detail can take some time
Yeah.
consuming. But I think if you're enjoying it, it's a decent one. When was it like? What was it you started? What's your kind of more go to? I guess do you prefer like speaking more kind of in person and doing events like that, or is it just sit down, research, and then analyze the paperwork?
Yeah, I mean, so I do both of those things, and I think it's nice that I do both of those things. Like I love doing events where, it's not just me kind of like doing public speaking, but hosting other people and that sort of embodied aspect of being there in a community together, talking about these things, having discussions. But then, to balance that, it's also quite nice just sort of being sat in my office, like reading through research on my own. So yeah, kind of best of both worlds.
Yeah. So so if we kind of go back to what you were saying previously, how there was from our perspective, well, I've dabbled in the ideas of looking around at it and doing research on it, but compared to like I've said before, other kind of states in America, it's a lot
Yeah.
more widely known. I think. Is there many studies? Kind of obviously, there's the Imperial College London one going on now, but is there many other ones apart from that one that's kind of going on in the UK? There are a lot, or is it still kind of quite, low? There's kind of a low number of trials happening.
So in universities, yeah, there's like stuff going on at King's College London, and University College London as well. I don't know about northern universities as much. I think perhaps this is a bit of a general trend in like the psychedelic movement, that it could be quite like south centric. Um, I think the University of Bristol have like definitely looked at psychedelic compounds. They're not doing like in-person clinical human trials, but there's definitely like investigations there about sort of yeah, the properties of these substances.
Yeah, well, I think the more northern you go, the alcohol gets cheaper. Nobody needs to do any research today. They're just having a good time.
Yeah.
um, so going, yeah, starting going onto that Imperial College London study. It's been going on for, I think, a few years now, hasn't it? I believe it's been kind of going through different kind of trials and different areas. What is it they're kind of studying? What is it that they're focusing their opinions and research on?
So the Imperial College Centre for Psychedelic Research, they've got multiple studies going on. The sort of main one that I guess was in the kind of global news limelight was their research looking at psilocybin to treat depression. Um, and they had like a big sort of double-blind placebo study where they like compared it with antidepressant. And lo and behold, the psilocybin therapy was more effective in patients. And then kind of from that study, they've done like other research from that patient group. So like further analyzing the data to look at like how mystical experiences influence the result. And then they're quite focused on like brain imaging studies as well. So Chris Timmerman is a neuroscientist and he does a lot about like exploring the kind of brain patterns and I mean like some of like the most kind of key findings that we have about psychedelics and their mechanisms come from Robin Carhart Harris's studies like at Imperial, which were looking at the brain responses of these depression patients and showing that like psilocybin kind of opens up this functional connectivity, which they then alluded to as being a key part of the therapeutic mechanism because it's allowing patients that are often stuck in these quite negative thought and behavior loops to have this opportunity of opening their um, opening the capacity in their brain for new networks to form, and in that comes like a new capacity for learning new perspectives, thoughts, and behaviors. So yeah, so there's a lot happening at Imperial at the moment. I believe that they may be doing more research with DMT at the moment, like the extended DMT states. And then there's also Small Pharma are running UK-based trials as well, looking at DMT for depression as well. That's another UK university, in answer to the last question.
Yeah, so I mean, with all your kind of research and what you've looked into the last couple of years, when the results were kind of coming out of that trial and it was like, oh, it's set to help people with depression more and things like that, with you just sitting there kind of go, well, duh, obviously we've known that for months anyway, we've known that for years prior. You've got some catching up to do.
Um, I mean, yeah, like there is a whole history of research that, does show that like these substances are sort of therapeutically beneficial in like the kind of 1960s and 50s. There was, yeah, they used LSD, psilocybin for all sorts of indications. And we know, across the globe that these tools are essential as part of like healing. Um, but yeah, so I mean, when the study results came out, like it wasn't really a surprise to me. In fact, like the Compass trials were probably like more of a surprise because actually like this significance of the antidepressants and the psilocybins, like the difference, it wasn't actually that much. But you've got to kind of consider that it's like, yeah, obviously, these mushrooms that like have healing properties, but it's all about like the context in which you use them and the therapy, right? So
Yeah, I think that's a big thing where it's like, okay, well, it's like with anything, isn't it? You can use it or you can abuse it. It's just dependent on which
mhm.
context that you use it in. Do you find that often when you research papers and you say, I've known this anyway. This is the results. This is what we've known for a while, but it's taking, I guess, the wider medical community a while to catch up.
Yeah, because like it needs to, even though if you like know a thing and it's kind of widespread common knowledge, like for that thing to be deemed as like scientifically, viable, like it needs to kind of go through a rigorous process where there's like measures and scientific sort of vigor um, that are all being like quite strictly adhered to. And it's funny, isn't it, that like kind of like society needs that in order to say that this is the truth, when actually, you know, does like the context of these kind of highly controlled clinical trials like even mirror real life as much? I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, even with that, I mean, taking into account the research that was going on in the 50s and 60s and the research that's going on now, how long would you say it would be until this is, open to the wider public? Is it a matter of years, decades? Because obviously, I think in the States, it's a lot more, you know, it's just a lot more. I don't know.
Yeah, I think in the States, I think people often compare and say, oh, we're always 10 years behind America in
Yeah.
like whether that's weight gain or views on opinions and things. But it seems like with this kind of research, we've never really caught up to kind of parallel them, if you get what I mean, because you've got like what it maps in America and things with that is it Rick Doblin,
Hmm.
but that's never kind of began in this country, has it?
What like I think, yeah, I don't think we're behind in research. I think that Imperial and like UCL are doing some really kind of forward thinking things, but I think that in terms of drug policy, like yeah, we're stuck in the past, and it's not just America. Like Australia fully legalized MDMA and psilocybin therapy, and in fact they're far ahead of America because like at the moment the only kind of like legal psilocybin schemes are that are out there, they're personal development, and more of this kind of sort of luxury retreat style thing. Whereas, I think the shift that we need to see is like these substances becoming medically available for people with severe mental health disorders. Which, yeah, America, you can access MDMA for PTSD, but like, yeah, it's kind of quite similar in the UK that like if you have a severe debilitating mental health disorder and you want to go through psychedelic therapy specifically to treat that, unless you're, looking at using ketamine therapy, then your only kind of means to access is through a clinical trial. So yeah, the safest bet is in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of remember that in Australia. That I must have read it somewhere. But I mean, Australia is very kind of in some areas they're very kind of stringent. Okay, we're not doing this. We're
Yeah.
not doing that.
Exactly.
Why do you think we are so like I guess delayed in following other kind of Western, I don't want to use the word Western world,
Mm.
but what do you think why we're so far behind or delayed in following?
Mm. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to tell you, but I think it's, the power, the people in government, there's just a resistance to the change. And it's funny that like, kind of whereas I guess, like America, you say we've been kind of more and more states decriminalizing drugs, like I can't remember who it was. It was like in power. I think like the person before the one at the moment, I just know the name, wanted to, kind of like harden our drug laws, like harden prohibition, which is just crazy because like there's so much evidence to show that it doesn't work. And the more that you criminalize like, people that use drugs, like the more harms that are going to come from that. And yeah, and also it's like economically it's not viable as well because of all the money that you spend on the rest and kind of then healthcare when you're thinking about like other drugs of abuse. That have like dangerous side effects. Yeah. So I don't know the answer, but I think it's stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like, I guess without getting kind of too political, there is this kind of belief. I think it's shifting now though. Before it's like, as every kind of podcast mentions this, the war on drugs. We have to shut everything down. But I think now, especially with all the research, it's kind of shifting. It's kind of like not kind of blaming the people anymore. It's like, okay, this is all the
Mm,
research now. What what are you gonna? Where are you? What's your opinion on this? With all this research that backs the complete opposite of what you've got to say.
And where do you take it as well? What do you do with the information?
But I mean, what's kind of your belief in it? Because I think that Rick Doblin, he turned around and said that like the whole idea is to it's like you're going down a ski slope, and you use your kind of thoughts are these pre-ingrained like slope marks that you go down. Whereas when you take kind of these altering stage of consciousness drugs, it kind of flattens the ground you use, so that you can experience it pretty much again or have new experiences just in everyday life. What do you think it is? Is it kind of like the whole kind of not just hallucinations? Is it being allowed to like open your brain more and to experience more?
Yeah, I think that's it. It's just being able to kind of like open your brain to sort of experience things in another way of life, and that has, so many benefits, not just, in terms of like mental health disorders where you are characterized by like rigid thought processes, which, is the kind of underpinning of like most mental health disorders. And yeah, it also kind of, allows for sort of creativity and just like new ways of being, new appreciation. But that state also like increases vulnerability a lot, and that's why like it's really important. We think about like who we're taking these substances with, or like whether they're going to be kind of given in sort of a ceremonial context, like who's holding that ceremony. We've really got to trust these people. Um, and it can be quite difficult as well to sort of have your whole like perception of reality just shattered in one way, right? So there's like this kind of opening mechanism. It's like powerful. It's definitely beneficial, but there's definitely harm to it. But it's, like that's not the only sort of mechanism really as well by which psychedelics are having effects, and we don't know like what mechanisms are going to be most useful for like different people because it's so individual. But there's also, this notion that like they bring up trauma, that they're like mind manifesting, and kind of they have the capacity to bring up like repressed thoughts and memories, parts of ourselves to the surface. And that's, like another kind of huge part of their healing mechanism.
Have you looked into the idea of, because I believe I'm right in saying you intro a bit your own yoga, aren't you? You do some yoga on the side. Have you ever researched that and looked into the whole idea of like the whole like DMT experience? If you follow a certain yoga practice, you can achieve the same results. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, so I've got a friend that does a lot of conscious connected breath work, and he's like convinced that you produce DMT in the brain because the experiences that he's had with his own breathwork practice, like they're uncanny. But then coming from like a rational scientific point of view, like I think the evidence for there being DMT in the brain is awful. It's not awful. It's just like it's just not enough to know. Not that there's like not any benefit to looking at anecdotal reports as like a means to prove or disprove something. But I do believe that practices can really take you into altered states of consciousness, whether it's the same thing as like it's the same whether it's the same neurochemical process, right? It's by the by. You could just see it as like different trains to get to the same destination, and that destination is just like a shift in a new way of like looking at reality, taking information in. But yeah, I think practices like breath work, like Kundalini is not something I practice myself, but I know a lot of people that have like had Kundalini awakenings, and that is like super trippy.
So you haven't tried the yoga then? You haven't tried it out, that specific one?
No, I mean my yoga practice is just like my kind of daily movement and meditation. But I don't feel like I'm utilizing it in that way. I feel like the benefits that I get from it are the benefits from being in it rather than trying to induce an altered state of consciousness.
I mean, yoga though, I don't know if you've ever tried it, but it is. I don't know how
it's
often you
hard.
like do it. It is insane.
Yeah.
Like
It's challenging.
You finish it and you're like, Oh, you just want to sleep. It's like the next. It's such an insanely active and body pushing experience. I don't know how you do it regularly. Like I'm like I do it
It
once
depends which
and I'm
type of
good for
yoga.
me.
And if you feel like you're pushing your body all the time, then I don't know if that is yoga. Like yoga is about like being in your body and
Mm.
listening to your body. So if you feel like you're just pushing it the whole time, then back off, change teachers, do a different flow.
I mean, do you also see yoga as a method of healing? I mean, is it sort of the effects are similar, as we've just touched on, just the sort of effects of taking psychedelics with yoga, it sort of being, it sort of transports you to a different level of reality, if that makes sense?
Mm. I mean, it definitely like alters your nervous system, the kind of like just focusing on your body sensations and slowing down your breathing. Like it's really good for putting you in like the sort of more parasympathetic nervous state, which actually is contrary to psychedelics, which do have this mild stimulating effect. And in that way, I think they're like different modalities of healing. Again, I think it's how you use it. If you're doing like Kundalini and you're entering altered states, and you could say them are the same, but I would say actually they're quite different. But those differences mean that like they can work together really synergistically and actually, so like before going into an experience, like sometimes like as you might be as the drug effects might be coming in, like actually practicing yoga is could be a really nice way to like enter that state because you're coming from a really calm, embodied and like grounded place. So there's like less chance for kind of anxiety occurring. So yeah, so I don't think they're the same, but I think there's potential for them to work together really beautifully.
Yeah, definitely. Even if you just go on a long distance run or something, you have no stresses when you finish. Do you? You're dying and you're tired, but you're probably the most relaxed that you've ever been in a while. Anyway, have
Mhm.
you ever looked and done like research into the idea of like how these psychedelic substances and things was used in the past? Like go back to like the old Catholic Church and like didn't they there's theories and ideas that they were like burning cannabis and it's salva or something. Have you ever looked into kind of how it was used historically, or have you not dabbled in that yet?
I mean, there's, a lot of kind of indigenous traditions that stems across the globe, very different methods of using different compounds and it's yeah, something that I've looked at, and they're because they're traditions that like still happen today and they have the history and we don't know exactly how long they are. It's like um yeah, so for example, I was like in the Sierra Mazateca of Mexico a couple of years ago and like engaged in kind of a ritual sort of ceremony that, has a very long lineage attached to it. Um, in terms of like in the UK, like we don't know much about our own sort of ancestral use of psychedelics because so much of the Druidic knowledge was wiped out by the invasion of the Romans. So we have like more of an indication of how they might have been used in other cultures across the globe, kind of going back as far as like 10,000 BC, right, where you see caveman paintings with like sort of depictions of people with mushroom heads and different fun things.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of fear, from what I've seen, there's a bit of a fear of like touching these more not traditional ones, but if they're still used in like spiritual practices, it's kind of like, do you want us kind of westernized culture diving in and go, oh, we'll have a bit of this, we'll see what this is all about. Like, is it what's it called? Is it mescaline in certain states in like old what they're called the Native American culture? Isn't it mescaline that they're kind of not panicking over, but they're like, well, with all the movement of
Mm.
they changed the law to allow it to be used for religious purposes, but now they're kind of worried that it's going to move into like a wider kind of societal use, and that's not what it was intended for.
Yeah, I mean that kind of like I guess the sort of lack of intention or not having like reciprocity and respect for the medicine is like a huge thing throughout like all sort of psychedelics. It's like, going as far back as the 1950s when like Gordon Wasson originally went over to Mexico and took mushrooms with Maria Sabina. And then there was huge flocks of tourists. And that was the first time Western people knew about psilocybin mushrooms, at least, kind of apart from maybe this whole history that our ancestors might have with psilocybin mushrooms that we don't know about with the Romans. Um, yeah, then like Maria Sabina, the person that gave Gordon Watson the mushroom, she was given like death threats and stuff because she like this whole flock of tourists came over to Mexico and they were like taking it without the kind of intention and ritual that they had in that area. And the worry with the peyote cacti that produces mescaline is that because it has become more popularized and more people are like signing up as members of the Native American church. I mean, like I don't know 100% on the laws and stuff, but I believe that you need to sign up to be a member of the Native American church and then you can access the hallucinogenic cacti. And is that because they take so long to grow, like people are
It's
harvesting
12
them for
years,
like
isn't it? I think for it
ceremonies.
to grow to come
Yeah,
to
and
kind of
then so there's
fruition.
worries, yeah, that like this plant's going to become extinct.
Mm.
I mean, what's next for you then? What kind of research you're focusing on now? What area is it that you're looking at? Is there any like interesting areas that you're kind of focusing more of your attention on now?
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm always just kind of like interested in sort of the changing spheres that happen, like the kind of cultural context which emerge like as these psychedelics become more popular and into the mainstream. So I think this huge like AI revolution that we're in is like definitely um something really interesting, and it's like, well, is there a potential, is there a scope that like AI could, assist in psychedelic therapies
In
or
what
like
way? In
how
what way
is,
could that?
kind of,
In what? Sorry. What? In what way could that
yeah.
actually work with AI and psychedelics? Because that does seem like quite an exciting
A niche
prospect.
thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. And like maybe it'll help, maybe it won't help, but like
Mm.
maybe the kind of creativity of psychedelics could help like instill ways for AI to be used in good, like, you know, but I guess there's one thing about like, ChatGPT and stuff like that, like is that it frees up time, right? And I
Yeah.
think that like through psychedelics are helping us kind of or helping people come to like realizations about like sort of priorities, like their importance of like connection, community, and nature. And I think that AI like gives us this chance to kind of have more free time, and in that way, like this kind of whole cultural shift which we're having, which I think is in part sort of like in responsibility of like psychedelics just to like become more connected to each other. Like maybe it, could help with that. Maybe it could do the complete opposite, and it's like
Mm.
people could just become more disconnected as technology advances. So I don't know how it will shift, but I think that like yeah, there's something interesting that's
Yeah,
probably going to
I think
happen.
no. If you took an iPhone back 100 years ago, nobody knows what an iPhone. Nobody knows what a phone is. They couldn't even wrap their head around the idea of a phone, can they? So I think the
Exactly.
whole idea of linking the two, like you're researching in, I think it probably has the ability to open up, ideas that you've never even crossed your mind, you've never even thought about, just because
Mm-hmm.
it's impossible to even understand at this point. But yeah, I know this is going to be a short episode, but thank you for jumping on and giving us your knowledge.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is there any way people can find you if they want to understand your research and learn a bit more?
Yeah, so if you just look at the Psychedelic Society, then you can like learn more about our organization. And then yeah, you can just email me, I guess, if you've got like questions and stuff. It's just Martha at psychedelicsociety.org.
Yeah, we'll
But yeah,
put
I don't
every
have my own
Of
website.
not
course.
yet anyway, not yet.
Not yet.
We'll put all your like details and everything
Yeah.
in the description after. But
We'll
yeah,
put all the links. Yeah.
yeah.
But thank you very
Thank you for
much.
today. I mean, I think this area is going to keep going and just going to keep growing, isn't it? And I think with the work that like you're doing and other people in the area are doing, it's just I can't see it coming to a sudden stop and being
No.
like we're shutting this down. It's I think it's going the other way now, back to widening the scope of perspective and things. But yeah, thank you again for coming on, and maybe we'll speak to you in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.